morning. Have you found anything interesting? No.
5 dead bodies yesterday.
5 dead bodies yesterday, today a sense of humour. But here they are digging into Roman Britain and treasures have been found before. This fine altar, dedicated to the Roman goddess Brigantia, owes its discovery to the Aire and Calder. The river has changed since Roman times. Today the navigation has become Britain's most successful commercial waterway.
It's here in Castleford that the two rivers that give the Aire and Calder navigation its name converge. The River Aire flows in from the north, the River Calder from the west. Looking at the water today makes you doubt the wisdom of the old rhyme. That's why Castleford girls are so fair. They bathe in the Calder and dry in the Aire.
Today it's liquid fuel, petrol, which has become one of the largest cargoes on the navigation. But thanks to the distant power stations, the traditional fuel is still a major traffic. The coal mines, which opened on the very banks of the navigation, meant that the canal proprietors had ready access to what became its major commodity. Over the years, the cheap and efficient carriage of coal became so important that it changed the history of waterborne transport. Push tugs were developed. Each of the pans they push or pull can carry 170 tons. The ings at Fairburn were made by man, but the birds of the air don't give a damn. Mining subsidence caused the formation of the Fairburn Lakes. Now they've become an RSPB bird sanctuary just yards from the banks of the canal where the water is graded Class 3 by the ecologists. Class 3? Barely supportive of life. It's difficult to imagine that Ferrybridge was once a village standing in rolling countryside, but that's how it used to be. Now the one-time village is crowded with symbols of the 20th century. It's here, to the Ferrybridge power stations, that the push tugs bring their cargo. 4 collieries feed into the system. One of them delivers its entire output by water. Each giant pan is maneuvered to the tippler system, which lifts it 40 feet in the air and sends its 170 tons cascading to the giant hoppers. Ferry Bridge is one of the most thermally efficient power stations supplying the national grid. In order to achieve its output, the station burns 5 million tons of coal a year. The push tugs deliver 1,000 tons an hour. Hence, when the day's work's over, the urge to let off steam. 1, 2, 3, 4. $5 million tons a year, enough to fill the canal we've travelled from Liverpool to Ferry Bridge with a 3-foot depth of coal. The arrival of the power stations must have come as something of a shock to the good people of Ferry Bridge. The cooling towers destroyed the view. What would the congregation have thought as they stepped through the graveyard to the village church? But the Ferry Bridge Church is the church that moved. Stone by stone, the central electricity generating board lifted the church and had it rebuilt, where the sun's light might strike it. Today it's a space-age streamlined bridge which carries the roar of the A1 traffic across the roar of the waterway. Beside it, the earlier Ferry Bridge is now an ancient monument. That bridge carried the Great North Road. Another factor which contributed to the survival and continuing success of the Aire and Calder was the flatness of the land through which it passes. The low-lying country of East Yorkshire meant that locks were a rarity, delays in transport slight.
It's in Nottingley that we leave the path of the River Aire. Now we're into limestone country and it's all canal the rest of the way. The Nottingley-Goole Canal, first surveyed by John Rennie in 1819. Rennie was the man who built London Bridge, but this canal was built after his death by the brilliant Leeds engineer George Leather. It opened in 1826.
After the blackness of the coal, the calcium of limestone comes as light relief. But industry is still with us. The town of Nottingley possesses one of the most famous names in glass manufacture, Rockware. Here the white sand from the Trent is discharged for the glass-making process. The factory is a sculpture park of praying mantis gantries. Knottingley also boasts one of the most famous names in shipbuilding, Harker's. To the boater, it's a worthy pilgrimage just to pass this inland shipyard, which has been building barges and seagoing ships for over 50 years. Harker's biggest tankers carry 60,000 gallons, the same capacity as the Humber Princess. It would take 28 road vehicles to shift an equivalent load.
The New Junction Canal off to the south is the baby of British waterways, the last important canal to be built in Britain. When it was opened in 1905, it had cost the Aire and Calder just £150,000 to link their navigation with the Sheffield and South Yorkshire navigation to the south. The Sheffield and South Yorkshire chipped in 150,000 of their own. The canal opened up vast new areas of coal deposits. Over the years, it must have paid back its initial investment 100-fold.
The New Junction Canal was planned and built by William Hammond Bartholomew, the Aire and Calder's greatest resident engineer. It was Bartholomew who invented and patented tom puddings, the forerunner of the push-tug system. Tom puddings are still in operation 120 years after their invention. Bartholomew must rank alongside Brindley, Telford and Rennie as one of our greatest waterway engineers. Such was his inventive genius that he probably wouldn't be surprised by the automatic bridge on the Sheffield branch. We call the Aire and Calder a navigation because it's partly a river and partly a canal, neither one thing nor the other. That's not to denigrate it. You have to remember that this navigation opened in the 17th century, half a century before James Brindley triggered off the canal age with the Duke of Bridgewater's canal. By the 19th century, the cost of trafficking coal on the Aire and Calder was less than 1/100th of a penny per ton per mile. On this canal in the 20th century, water transport still remains the most economical method of moving goods in bulk.
When we come to look at the Aire and Calder navigation today, it's difficult to imagine that the company that ran this long stretch of water was once so rich and powerful that it was dubbed the fourth estate of the realm. You have to remember what the Aire and Calder owned. With 100 miles of their own waterway and effective control over a lot more, they were rich and they were powerful. They owned the mills on the canal banks and they owned Goole. After all, why shouldn't they? They built it.
The history of Goole as a town really began in 1820. Before that time, the place was a hamlet of about 400 farmers and fishermen. It was when the proprietors of the Aire and Calder navigation made the new cut from Nottingley that they found their new canal went nowhere. They needed a town at the end of it. 6 years later, they had built one. On a good day, Goole is an active, bustling little place with a certain continental air about it. The town of Goole was designated a port 155 years ago when a brig called Stapler cleared for Hamburg. In the beginning, there were no public buildings other than the company offices and the Lowther Hotel, named after the first vessel into the dock. The canal company not only ran the waterway, but administered the town and port. As head of the company, W.H. Bartholomew had rooms reserved, and he always made a weekly visit.
There's no surviving record to tell us which suite of rooms Bartholomew used, but it's pretty certain that he'd know this room. A perfectly ordinary-looking meeting room, you'd think. But what's this?
This mural, by an unknown artist, shows the port of Goole in all her pristine glory, with barges and barks, and on the right, behind the rigging, the Customs and Excise Office. The Lowther artist wasn't acknowledged. Neither in his own lifetime was Reuben Chappell, the son of Goole, who painted some 12,000 ships, mostly to commission from their masters. Such was Chappell's love of sail that even after the steamships came, he painted sail on the horizon. Nowadays, you don't have to look to the horizon to be reminded why this port stands among green fields. It stands at the terminus of the Aire and Calder navigation, where international vessels slide smoothly through the 3 miles of quays and the 9 wet docks, which make this England's most inland port, almost 60 miles from the sea. The port of Goole still reflects the genius of W.H. Bartholomew. Over a century after their invention, 2 of his original coal hoists are still in use, unloading the coal from compartment boats into the holds of seagoing ships. Bartholomew's Vineyard, as Goole was dubbed by some envious 19th century wit, ends my journey on the Humber Princess. Now, with her radio mast raised and her radar at the ready, she becomes a seagoing vessel as she heads through Ocean Lock, the last lock we'll see on our voyage between 2 seas.
Next time, we're off on tidal waters for the first time since we left Liverpool. We're going to take the keelboat Comrade down the Ouse and into the Humber. Don't miss the boat.